setting the stage for your Georgia Saturday. This is DawgNation Game Day. Brought to you by Pella Windows and Doors, Kroger, R.S. Andrews, and Jittery Joe's Coffee. Now here's your host, Kaylee Mansell.
For the first time since 1964, two SEC teams will face off in the Sugar Bowl here in the Superdome. The history, the tradition, the pageantry, it's all a part of the experience. But at the end of the day, this is a college football playoff quarterfinal, and these Georgia Bulldogs know that from now on, it's do or die.
It's always a business trip for us. You know, there's a bowl game, there's a reward at the end of the season, and then there's a college football playoff game. And when you're part of a CFP in a college football playoff game, it's meant to be a business trip. It's win or go home.
Welcome in, DawgNation. This is DawgNation Game Day. I'm Kaylee Mansell with my partner in crime, Jeff Sentell. And here's the thing about this game. We've had all month to talk about it. I've had fun talking about it, but I'm done talking about it. I'm ready to see this game played out on the field between Georgia and Ole Miss.
Kaylee, let's talk about the Georgia Bulldogs entering right now, taking the playing surface here at Caesars Superdome. You know, that's a head dog in front.
Yep.
Obviously, Andrew Smart is his wingman to his left. That lets you know it's time to play some ball.
I figure with a bowl game, maybe Andrew comes out in a full suit, but no, I guess you could say this was a business trip for him, too. He's got his athletic clothes on. He'll probably be warming up with the wide receivers later. I think the thing that I'm hearing the most about this game is a lot of Georgia fans assume that because Kirby Smart has already beaten Ole Miss this year, Kirby Smart's 4-0 rematches, that you know, Georgia to the Fiesta Bowl might be a lock, but I don't necessarily think that's the case. I think it's going to be a really competitive four-quarter game. This is a really tough opponent, and from here on out, you know, this is just one step to the national championship, but you have to complete this step first before we start looking ahead.
Speaking of steps, Kaylee, right there, you have Todd Hartley, the popular tight ends coach, and his young son, Tucker. There's Scott Sinclair right there, the director of all this strength and conditioning. Kaylee, I think this is a depth football game. One of the things I do for our company is I write about players. I study talent. I study about who's got more dudes than the other side. And I really feel this is much like it was in the irregular season, Kaylee. Georgia simply has a deeper, more talented roster than Ole Miss.
Yeah, and I mean, at this point, you can't assume that it's going to be easy, but I think you're right. I think that Georgia has a clear advantage in a lot of ways, but it is just crazy that in general we've got Gunnar Stockton coming in as well. He'll be a huge part of this game. We're also going to look back on Gunnar's experience last year in the Sugar Bowl, but it is unbelievable how different the feeling is of being here today on the field as opposed to what we were coming into last year. I don't know, I just feel like fans in general are a little bit more optimistic. The vibes are higher, and there's something around this team. They're just so locked in.
So much different, Kaylee. Remember a year ago, Georgia was wondering what Carson Beck's loss would mean. Gunnar Stockton was set to make his first start. You had the terrible tragedy that took place here that kind of took the focus off football a little bit. And now you have Georgia playing as well as any team in the country right now, ready to defend its SEC title, ready to do what it does all year, stop the run the football, and they get the Ole Miss Rebels minus the engine of their team, head coach Lane Kiffin. I do think that is a factor.
So we're going to continue to keep the camera on the Georgia players as they come into the field. While we do that, why don't we go ahead and show you what we've got going on today's episode of DawgNation Game Day. Let's go ahead and address the one thing that everybody's talking about. It's the bye weeks. It's the layoffs. Up until really this Alabama-Indiana game that's still taking place right now, teams with a bye 0-6 between last year and this year. A lot of people were freaked out about it last night after Ohio State and then this morning with Texas Tech. I understand that concern, but right now at halftime, Indiana leads Alabama 17-0. Now we've seen Alabama come back from that deficit already this year, but Indiana off to a quick start, so I feel like that should give some people some comfort in this. And also, we got to talk about Ole Miss as well, because this is a new coach. Same team, but there's a lot of distractions going on with that group right now, so we're going to address all of those things. And, of course, my Mansell's matchup, which is going to be the Rebels' run game versus the Georgia run defense. You said it earlier, you've got to stop the run, and that starts with Kewan Lacey. We're going to bring on our good friend Rodrigo Blankenship. He's going to talk about Georgia's X factor, just his confidence level overall coming into this game. Then, of course, we're going to bring on our good friend Cody Chafins, who's here with us today, to do some boots on the ground. Then we will follow it up with, we've got tons of guests today, but before we get to them, we're going to celebrate 1 year of Gunnar as the starter. I know this game means a lot to him, so we got to talk about him. Then we'll get your Sentell's intel where we'll talk about the freshmen that have really started to emerge in the back half of this season. We'll do our satisfying stats, and then we'll also get the chance to hear from not just Connor Riley, but also Mike Griffith is going to come down and join us before we do our keys to the game and wrap it up with a playoff hype video. But let's talk about that bye. We got to get it out of the way. We've asked so many questions about it to Kirby Smart. Do you think that played a factor? Do you think that played a factor? But I actually thought that he gave the best answer to something regarding the layoff earlier this week here at the Sugar Bowl.
Well, game shape. You can run all you want, but you can't get in game shape until you play a football play. A football consists of sprinting 10 to 15 yards, tackling somebody, getting up, going back, do it again, repeat that. You don't do that in a layoff. You don't go tackle live and hit people and risk injury, especially this time of year. So your fundamentals, blocking, tackling, can deteriorate really quickly if you're just worried about being in shape. So we try to attack it all. We try to simulate things, make things happen. As coaches, you get really comfortable and you don't make decisions in critical moments. And next thing you know, you're out there on special teams and something happens you haven't prepared for, where in the season you have a routine you follow. So there's things you try to simulate as best you can, but it is different to have. There's no sport where you have this long layoff. It's not a basketball, not football, not baseball, where you go from playing once to 25, 30 days playing again.
I think all of the reasons that he listed are valid, and I like what he said there at the end about this is the only sport where they do that. But having seen Georgia practice in person last Saturday, they didn't look like they were out of shape to me. I know it's not the same thing as a real game time experience, but this was a Georgia team who looked physical at practice. They're moving at the speed of light, so he finally took the bait on the question, but I think this Georgia team actually benefits from the rest.
You see a lot of knee rollers going by, Kaylee. You saw Gabe Harris confirmed on the knee roller. You saw other players as well. Kaylee, I'm just going to be very forthright with you here. I think that is a blasé stat. In terms of the playoffs and the bye teams and the lower seeds, the higher seeds. I feel like you've got a lot of blips last year when Ohio State was a loaded roster. They lost. Then you have Arizona State and Boise State that didn't really need to be seated where they were. You look at this year, you've got an Indiana team that's playing quite well. I think it's really just, I don't know if we have enough data there to call that the 0-6 thing that everybody was worried about. And like this is some subterfuge and some layer of the playoffs that's going to make it really hard. I think if you got a good football team and you're playing well, I think that's going to carry over no matter what. And in Georgia's cases, they've gotten a couple of new pieces back. They've got Ethan Barbour back. They've got Colby Young back. That makes them a better football team.
Yeah, I think after seeing Georgia's Sugar Bowl loss last year, that was the easy thing to point to because it just felt like all these coincidences happening at once. But I certainly don't think that was the case at all. This is a very different team that's coming in this time than came in last year. I thought Kirby Smart actually pointed it out, nailed right on the head, why this year's team is so much different than last year's.
They've had a great personality. I think I've said it over and over, but, there were times in the past that we were a little bit older, or we had a lot of guys that had been in the program for a fifth or sixth year. It was during the little COVID run there, and there were times you felt like they didn't love the game. They didn't really want to be out there and practice like you really want. And that hasn't been the case with this group. They've had a lot of energy. We're a little younger, and they want to be coached. They want to be coached hard. They like practicing hard. They get out there and do exactly what you demand of them each and every day. And they've seen some of the rewards from that, some of the physical toughness, some of the stop the run the ball. I mean, like they see the rewards from it, and they bought into that being an identity, and that's created a little bit different. Now, I don't know that we're as talented as some of those other teams, just sheer draft picks, but that's not what always wins. I mean, at the end of the day, it's a cohesion of a team, a lot of role players that you have that really buy into doing things that helps you win.
They're making his typical pregame lap. It never gets old. He's really taking it all in here. But Connor Riley and I kind of touched on this on our Thursday night show, DawgNation at Large. I think from the physical standpoint, what he said to stop the ball, run the ball. I mean, they're just really, really good at accomplishing the fundamentals. And then with this year's team, too, I think there's this sense of we need to earn this for ourselves. A lot of the older guys, they already had 1 ring, 2 rings. And with the exception of a Micah Morris and an Oscar Delp, These guys don't have that, and they want that, and so there's a hunger that comes with this group in particular, and I think that's really going to stand out today in that youthful exuberance personality thing that Kirby Smart talked about there.
I think there's so many guys, Kaylee, like, you know, one of the things we talked about on the world-famous DawgNation Daily program this morning was that Georgia has 8 starters on its defense that had 200 or fewer snaps when they played Ole Miss the first time. So they've gotten boatloads of reps since then. They've gotten better in a lot of areas, and it's what you do with a football team, Kaylee. You take a chisel and you kind of hammer away, and you try to figure out what you are. You kind of work on the imperfections. You smooth out the things that you're really good at already. I think you see a lot of players. There's so many players like a Nate Frazier, like a Zayden Walker. You keep going on an Elias Williams. You know, guys that just continually keep getting better. Dontrell Glover was only started a couple of games by the time these two teams first played. And you see where they're at now, the Juan Gastons, players like that, Ernest Green III. I think this is just a more well-rounded football team. And Kaylee, let's make no bones about it. This is a Kirby Smart football team. Run the ball, play defense. When he's got those two components working for his programs, they usually fare very well in the postseason.
And the reason why I wanted to bring this up here, because I don't want to harp on the past too much. This is a different Georgia team. This is a completely different game, but really just a way of closing that chapter and turning the page. That way we can focus on the Sugar Bowl that's taking place here tonight, and that starts with a different opponent. Well, sort of different in a way. It's Ole Miss, but they've already played Ole Miss this year, but now you've got Pete Golding, who has taken over this program in the absence of Lane Kiffin. A lot of the same players, but there's so much going on with the coaching staffs. Felt like I really got to learn a lot about Pete Golding this week. I love the coaching battle between him and Kirby Smart, two defensive-minded guys, very, very different from what Lane Kiffin did. And it's funny, our producer, Jay Black, made a good point. Talk about Kirby Smart's 4-0 in rematch games. Pete Golding has only ever coached one game.
Yeah.
But I like the coaching battle that's going to take place between them. Obviously, a defensive guy. Do you think that this Ole Miss defense will get better under Golding at the head?
I think it's just going to be hard because you got to have him overseeing everything, like fourth downs, 2-point conversions. Do we go for it here? Do we try to stay ahead of the chains on 3rd and 10? Do we protect our defense? Kaylee, I kind of look at it as not Ole Miss but new Miss, because you have Lane Kiffin gone. That was their genius play caller. You know, you got so many things about Pete Golding. One thing I'll say about Pete Golding is he's extremely relatable. Like,
yes.
He's a guy that you would drink a beer with. And maybe that, we were talking earlier today, it's kind of like, you know, Lane Kiffin was a different sort of guy, maybe the polar opposite of what Pete Golding is. Kind of like how maybe, you know, you have the flamboyant quarterback and then you've got a down-home, humble guy like Gunnar Stockton. I think you just can't get better with the best football coach on your roster no longer there. And you can say the same players are there. You can say the same coaches are there. There's just something different. I would caution anybody that thinks this is not a factor to imagine Georgia playing with Mike Bobo as your interim coach today and Kirby as the head coach of the Atlanta Falcons. It would be totally different, this program that Kiffin built, without him here today. Another thing, Kewan Lacey, the guy that's a big running back, right?
We're going to talk to him in just a second. We're going to talk about him. It's funny, you talk about new Miss and how things are drastically different, but earlier this week, Pete Golding basically disagreed with every single thing that you just said, so let's hear Pete Golding's take on it.
Yeah, sure.
Yes, I've always had 2 notebooks everywhere I've been of because of and in spite of. And I think that's everywhere. You know, I think you win because of a lot of things. I think you win in spite of a lot of things at certain places. And so it was always keeping those. So, hey, if I ever got my opportunity, okay, what would I continue to do that we've done that's been really effective? And then what would I eliminate, right, that I don't think affects winning or losing? And this one's a little different from the timing of it. And so, like Coach Smart always said, this thing's already rolling. Right? It wasn't like we're taking over and we're starting fresh. I mean, at that point, we were 11-1. Everything was headed in the right direction. We got really good players, all right, and we got good systems that have been in place. We got a good staff. So at that point, it was just trying to keep it together and get back to the routine as fast as possible and get back to ball. And so it wasn't about changing everything. It wasn't about my opinion at that point. If anything's been changed since then, it's been through the Players Council, and it's been voted on by the players because it's their team. And so we've added a couple things that we felt like can help us, right, through them, and we've taken away a couple of things that don't affect winning or losing, but that wasn't my decision the entirety, right? That was also the Players Council decision. So this was something to come in, right? A lot of people have gotten us to this point, most importantly the players, and let's create good plans for them to put them in the best position to have success. Let's hold them accountable in the process, and let's go have fun.
Basically already answered the question I was going to ask you to this, but at that point I really just wanted you to hear his rebuttal huddle. So we'll move on from Pete Golding because I want to talk about one of the guys that you brought up, and that's Kewan Lacey. It doesn't take a lot to recognize that the two real threats on this Ole Miss team, that's Trinidad Chambliss and that's Kewan Lacey. Kewan Lacey, one of the best backs in the SEC. You see it here, second in the SEC for rushing yards per game, first in the SEC for rushing touchdowns, but also they run him a lot. He's first in the SEC for rushing attempts per game, and because he runs so much, obviously that yards per carry is going to be a little bit down, just 17th. But then you got Trinidad Chambliss, just such a dynamic quarterback, third in the SEC for passing yards per game, 19 touchdowns, just 3 interceptions. So this is not someone that turns the ball a lot, turns the ball over a lot, and also fourth in the SEC for quarterbacks in rushing yards per game. I know that's something that we'll get to later. They got to be able to stop these two guys because these are the ones that change the course of the game. You can't let these guys get hot.
Kaylee, you get my mind twirling there a little bit about when Pete Golding said all those things. Think about this for a second. Pete Golding has never coached in a game for Ole Miss when his team was trailing. Period. He's never been the head coach when his team was trailing.
No adversity.
And he is in the middle of the playoff run against the most successful playoff coach in this entire college football bracket right now. So I think that's some tall mountains. I don't buy a lot of the hype about Kewan Lacey saying he's good. I'm really fearful or mindful anytime when a running back has a shoulder injury.
Yeah.
It's probably the worst injury you can have because that's your power. That's where you're going to meet the defense in a lot of spots. And, given the workload that he's gotten and how many, basically reps and all the tread on his tires right now here in the playoffs where he's supposed to summon up his best game when we already saw what a fresh Kewan Lacey did against Georgia in Sanford Stadium. So that's one of those things you just wonder about. How is Ole Miss going to win this football game? I agree with you. It's got to be with the legs of Kewan Lacey, the legs of Trinidad Chambliss. They call him Winidad Chambliss. You know they call him that right now at Ole Miss. So they like the puns there. But again, these two teams, they've played once. The rankings say they are what they are, and I can't wait in a couple of hours. We're going to see what they're actually about.
Well, regardless of the shoulder injury or not, I actually did feel like because of a guy like Trinidad Chambliss and what he can do with his legs and how hot we've seen him get with those over the last couple weeks, I actually did make my matchup. You've got to stop the Ole Miss run because when it comes to their wide receivers, they really spread the ball out a lot. There's a bunch of different targets. They don't have like a Zachariah Branch type guy, but if you let Trinidad Chambliss start running around all over this place, that's going to concern me just a little bit. So I really think they have to stop the run, especially from the Trinidad Chambliss perspective.
So in the first meeting, he was the only run game that Ole Miss basically had. I like the point you made there about their wide receivers. Ole Miss has 4 receivers that all have at least 500 yards of receiving on the year, but that's one of those things that I think it's a byproduct of Lane Kiffin. I think it really is because in a lot of those games, think about this, Kaylee, you got a defensive-minded coordinator head coach now. And, a lot of the ways that Ole Miss won is they pushed the envelope. They went for it on fourth downs. Well, him being a defensive-minded guy, I don't know if he's going to want to put his defense in bad situations in this playoffs where Kiffin was like, this is what we do. I mean, one of the things I love of what Pete Golding said was he talked about we don't need people dunking on the sidelines. This is a football game. We don't need people dunking on the sidelines, and you got to love a guy that wants to take it really back to old school football a little bit there.
Yeah, but you saw it right there on the matchup that Ole Miss leads the SEC in rushing touchdowns. It's going to be really crucial to stop that in the red zone, but that's what Georgia has done so well this year. So I'm confident in what Georgia's defensive line can put out there without Gabe Harris or not.
Yeah, you look to Joseph Jonah Ajonye as a guy that maybe steps into the breach there a little bit and what Georgia tries to do. I think you might see some Quintavious Johnson kind of freelancing in a lot of areas right there. But, Georgia, make no bones about it, you make Ole Miss get comfortable and you make things easy if they get the run game going. Kaylee, we've been talking about this for a lot of post games and pregame shows. What Kirby tries to do is take away what you do best. You try to make them one-dimensional. And you're going to see, I feel, like a one-dimensional Ole Miss football team tonight try to beat Georgia.
So we've got our friend Rodrigo Blankenship waiting on standby. I need Jeff to go to the other side of the field and start looking at these Georgia players, see what information we can gather. So in just a moment, we're going to talk to Rodrigo. But first, I want to give a shout-out to our friends at Jittery Joe's. It's weeks like this that make you miss Jittery Joe's because it's so cold outside. That warm cup of coffee can change everything. It's been voted Athens' best coffee shop for 15 years running, and now they even have franchising opportunities. So no matter where you're at in the state of Georgia, you can bring Jittery Joe's and that authentic coffee taste to your hometown. Spread the love with friends. And also, I had the chance to talk to our good contact at Jittery Joe's, Kate, earlier, who asked me how I was feeling about this game. We're excited to be here. I think it's going to be really, really competitive, but they are locked into Georgia football as well. So that's the kind of community that we have here at DawgNation, supporting other Georgia fans. So make sure to visit Jittery Joe's to learn more about franchising opportunities, and also don't forget to download the Jittery Joe's app and get half off your first drink. It honestly feels like it's been almost a year since I got to talk to Rodrigo. It's crazy how time flies when you do have the bye, but Rodrigo, coming into this particular Sugar Bowl, it's obvious that there is a different feeling from the team, from the fans. What's your overall confidence level coming into this year's game?
I think my confidence level coming into this game is definitely higher than it was last year. I think that for myself and a lot of Dog fans, we weren't quite sure what to expect going into last year's Sugar Bowl with Gunnar Stockton making his first career start against the top 10 Notre Dame defense last season. And so I think that because we've seen Gunnar play all year this season, we've seen him grow, we've seen him develop in so many ways and just come up so clutch in so many big-time moments throughout the season. Obviously, I think that that worry is going to subside for a lot of fans going into this week. I think that the only other concern that fans might have is, maybe the bye team blues, as I'm going to call it, where we have seen some not so great track records from some of the teams that have had byes coming into this 12-team format. But as we've seen with Indiana that are playing right now, they're one of the few teams that's been able to kind of quash those bye team blues and come out and start fast, especially on the offensive side of the ball. And so that also gives me a little bit of confidence, strangely enough, that Georgia is also going to be able to do that, come out and start fast on offense, because we don't have a quarterback making his first career start tonight. Everyone has been there and done that. A lot of these guys played in the playoffs last year in the Sugar Bowl in this same venue, so it's going to be a very familiar sight for a lot of these guys. There's just so many reasons that you can point to that lead me to believe that this team is going to be just fine, and I have a lot of confidence that they're going to go out and perform at a high level tonight.
I know that a lot of people's confidence has changed from last year's game to this year's game, but I even just feel like the confidence of Georgia fans has grown so much since the first time that Georgia and Ole Miss played earlier in the season. These are two very different teams. Obviously, this Georgia defense is a completely different monster than the one that we saw in that first Ole Miss matchup. So is the defense the clear X factor that's changed, or is there something else that maybe you point to that says, okay, Georgia's got this advantage over Ole Miss that maybe they didn't have the first time around?
Oh, I definitely think the defense is a major advantage. I look at some of the splits between these two teams' defenses going into the first matchup and to where we are now, where Ole Miss's defense was giving up about 21.5 points per game going into the Georgia game, and in all games since then they're down to 18.5. But on the other side, the Georgia defense was giving up about 22 points a game going into the Ole Miss game, and in all games since then we're down to 13.4 points per game. So the defense has definitely made a very substantial improvement, especially in the last probably 5 weeks. I'd say we've seen substantial improvement from the defense, holding Texas to 10 points, Alabama to 7 in the SEC championship. Georgia Tech team held them completely out of the end zone when they were one of the most productive offenses in the country all year long. So the defense has made some substantial improvements. The offense has also made some, incremental improvements since that Ole Miss game. Obviously, that was their highest point production on the game, and they have continued to perform at a high level in some of these recent weeks. So I do think that the defense is the biggest advantage you can point to say that the game is going to lean in Georgia's favor. But I do also think that the coaching battle, the coaching perspective is going to be another indication of why Georgia may have an advantage in this game. As you just mentioned with Jeff, this is Coach Golding's second career game. He has never coached in an instance where he is losing. He's never had to make a critical fourth down situation on whether or not to go for it or punt it or kick the field goal, whatever the case may be. So he hasn't been put in any high-pressure coaching decision-making situations yet. And I think that obviously with all the experience that Coach Smart has, I definitely think that is going to be a big advantage for the Dogs tonight as well.
Okay, well, this is a perfect time for us to have you on, because we kind of need you to split the tie between Pete Golding and Jeff, in the sense that we said that Jeff said that this is a new Miss team. This is totally different, even with the same players on the field. But then you heard Pete Golding say, it doesn't really change that much. I'm a different guy, but these are the same players. So Jeff's not here, by the way, so don't feel like you have to totally agree with him. We need you to break the tie on that. How much does it really change under Pete Golding?
I do think that it is a little bit of a different team. I'm not going to, say it's a completely different. I wouldn't go so far as to say it's a new Miss team, but I do think that it is a different version of Ole Miss. While they did have nearly an identical performance against Tulane, which is the one-to-one comparison that we can make compared to when they had Lane Kiffin in their first matchup, I do think this is going to be a little bit of a different team. I do think that with Coach Golding being a defensive-minded coach, I do think that probably lends to him being slightly less aggressive, especially in those fourth and short situations. As we touched on, I do think that I would err on the side of him being a little bit more conservative. Just being a defensive-minded coach, I feel like that typically tends to be how they operate. Now, obviously, Coach Smart, I think, was also kind of like that early on, and he has now progressed over the course of his tenure as the head coach of University of Georgia to be a little bit more aggressive, where we saw that call against Texas, going for the onside kick. It takes time to get to that point as a head coach where you feel confident making those high-risk decisions in order to tip the scales in your favor in a tightly contested matchup. And I don't think that Coach Golding is there yet, being in only his second game ever. So, I do think that there is going to be a little bit of a difference for this team. I also think that perhaps there is an opportunity for their defense to not play as best as they always do, considering he now is the head coach. He's going to have to stay locked in while the offense is on the field the entire time. It's not just, okay, I need to lock in for the defense, and then when the defense is off the field, I can go sit down and talk to my guys at the bench and drop X's and O's on the iPad before the next drive. He has to stay locked in while the team is on the field the entire game. That's going to divide his attention, whether he would like to admit it or not, that it is going to divide some of his attention and focus on this game, where he has to stay locked in for decision-making throughout the entire course of the game. So I do think this is going to be a little bit different Ole Miss team because we have a new head coach. He's going to have different tendencies. He's going to have a different level of aggressiveness, and who knows, it may change his play calling on defense because he's taking into consideration so many more factors than he did before. So obviously the players are the same, whether Coach Golding would like to admit it or not. I think he's been giving a lot of credit to Lane Kiffin and the team that he has been able to build. If Coach Golding is saying that the players are, the major difference maker, well, this is a team full of players that Coach Kiffin has brought into the program. So whether he wants to admit it or not, I think he's giving a lot of credit to Coach Kiffin for the roster that he's been able to build. If he's saying that the players are going to be, the main consistency and that the coaching isn't going to make a whole lot of a difference. But I think that we will see come opening kickoff that the coaching will have a difference in this game. And like I said, I do think that's going to lean in Georgia's favor.
I have been waiting to ask you this for what feels like all day, because I can't imagine watching what this special teams disasters have looked like through the college football playoff from your eyes as someone who played in those positions, to see how crucial those moments have been throughout the first two rounds. So when you're looking at the special teams matchups tonight, is there anything that sticks out, whether that's on the Georgia end or the Ole Miss end? Because we've seen a ton of missed field goals through the first two rounds.
Yes, we have seen some special teams play, work to the detriment of their team, thinking about the Ohio State game, and their kicker missed a field goal that ultimately led them to still have a 2-score deficit as they were driving late in the game, trying to, salvage that game and get back into it late. They were still down by 2 possessions due to a missed field goal earlier in the game. So special teams has had a big impact, for better or for worse, for some teams already at this point in the college football playoffs. In this matchup, I do think this is an interesting matchup from a special teams perspective, and more specifically from a specialist perspective, because I do think this is an instance where Georgia's specialists will be more or less evenly matched in terms of, their specialist. Obviously, Georgia has had Bo Gardner win the Best Long Snapper in the Country award, and we have had Brett Thorson win Best Punter in the Country. So obviously, I think that those two guys are great, and honestly, I think that Peyton probably should have been in the conversation for the Luke Rosa Award, at least to be a finalist. I think that he's one of the best in the country, but obviously I'm a little bit biased. It's just his volume didn't necessarily represent what you would look for, to be picked for a Groza finalist, but that speaks to the success of the Georgia offense through this point in the season. But, I do think that Georgia has great specialists, but when I look at the other side on the Ole Miss specialist, they've got some great guys as well. Their punter is very good. Their punt coverage team is very good. They've got close to a 44-yard net punt average, which is, very close to Georgia's. So their punt team is very solid. And then their field goal kicker, Lucas Carnero, as well, is also very good. He's having a great season, almost 89% on field goals to this point in the year with a long of 54 yards. So Ole Miss's specialists are also very good. So I do think that if this game is going to come down to special teams, Ole Miss will carry their own weight. It's not going to be an instance where I feel like Georgia just clearly cut and dry has the superior specialist in the special teams. Ole Miss is going to be very equally yoked from a specialist and special teams perspective. So just something to watch out for. Georgia's going to have to look for advantages in every way possible. And so if we're going to have an advantage from the special teams, our specialists are going to have to bring their absolute A-plus game tonight.
So as you can see, Ole Miss is now entering in behind us. So I think it's the perfect time to do our first Rodrigo's Big Rocks of 2026. What do you want to see Georgia do against this team today?
Yeah, I think the first thing that I want to see is that we establish the run early. Georgia's obviously one of the best rushing teams in the SEC. We've got 2 great running backs. Gunnar Stockton also very capable with his legs. We've got 3 rushers with over 400 rushing yards and at least 6 touchdowns apiece. So Georgia's been great with running the ball. I want to see us make sure that we do that early in this game. Just keep the whole playbook open. Keep the Ole Miss defense guessing. Similar to walking into our first matchup against Ole Miss earlier in the season, the more vulnerable side of this Ole Miss defense is their run defense. So as long as we're able to establish the run early, keep the chains moving, keep our offense in positive down and distance on 2nd and 3rd down, that's going to allow Coach Bobo to be able to, fully open up his playbook, get creative as we have seen him do at times during the season when we get into those favorable down and distances, and eventually those explosive plays should show up. So I want to make sure that we establish the run game early. That's going to be my first one. Our next point is going to be to limit the Ole Miss explosive plays for their offense. That's something that really hurt us in our first matchup against Ole Miss when they, scored on several possessions, what seemed like, we just could not stop them from getting into the end zone in the first matchup, and a lot of those plays came on explosive plays, at least 20 or more yards downfield. So I really want to see us limit the explosive pass plays for Ole Miss. If Ole Miss is going to be scoring tonight, I want to make sure that they're earning every yard and we're not giving them big chunk plays throughout the course of the game, and I think that will ultimately lead to a little bit more success than what we saw in our first matchup. And the third big rock is going to be make Trinidad Chambliss uncomfortable. Trinidad Chambliss, obviously one of the best quarterbacks in the SEC, arguably one of the best quarterbacks in the country. Looking at his 11 full games this season, he's averaging almost 295 passing yards a game. So, that's going to be towards the top of the list for any quarterback across the country this year. And then looking at his completion percentages is actually a very interesting split that I noticed when going over his stats from this year. He completes over 70% of his passes when he is at home, but he completes less than 58% of his passes when he is away from home. So obviously he's not going to have that home crowd behind him to make sure that the environment is quiet while the offense is on the field. So if we can keep our crowd engaged, make him uncomfortable from a noise perspective, make him uncomfortable with heating him up with extra pressure, as we have seen this defense do over the last few weeks, being a lot more aggressive with sending extra blitzers from all across the formation. If we can accelerate his decision-making process, keep this crowd in the game, and just make him uncomfortable, I think we'll see that accuracy decline, that decision-making and timing decline. Ultimately, I think that will lead to some opportunities to take advantage of this Ole Miss offense in the passing game, and just keep him uncomfortable from start to finish will allow us to have a lot more success than what we saw in our first matchup.
So for those who have not made themselves familiar with him yet, you can see we've got Pete Golding live right now. Team just came out, and so in just a moment we're going to hear from Mike Griffith and Connor Riley on more when it comes to Pete Golding. And with that, Rodrigo, we will say goodbye to you, and I'm hoping it's going to be all good things when we see you for the DawgNation postgame show.
I hope so too. I'm really looking forward to this matchup. Thank you so much for having me on tonight. Go Dogs.
And don't forget, it's the first Brandon Adams post-game show of 2026. He's been doing it for a long time, and I know that he's really excited to take on this one tonight here in the Superdome. So as I mentioned, we've got tons of guests to come. We've also had eyes on the field. Cody's been watching, Jeff's been watching, so we're going to talk about all the sights, sounds, maybe try to do some of our own injury reporting. But first, we're going to take a short break. This is DawgNation Game Day. We'll be right back.
Nothing makes a house feel more like a home than quality windows. So trust the professionals at Pella Window and Door of Georgia. We'll equip your home with energy-efficient windows and doors just right for you. Schedule your free in-home, no-pressure consultation. Get product samples, installation options, and a free quote. Log on to PellaGA.com and visit our new Experience Center in Duluth. Tell them Brandon Adams sent you. Pella Window and Door of Georgia. Viewed to be the best.
Hey, Dog Nation. I'm Brandon Adams. If you love what Kaylee Mansell does here in our DawgNation Game Day pregame show, and I know you do, you'll also love our DawgNation postgame show. After every UGA home game, we're live at the UGA bookstore. And after every game, we're also available to you on the DawgNation video channels. We have video highlights, live calls, plenty of post-game reaction. Hopefully, talking about big Georgia wins each and every Saturday. The place to be after the game is on the DawgNation post-game show. We'll see you there after today's game.
This is DawgNation Game Day, brought to you by Pella Windows and Doors, Kroger, R.S. Andrews, and Jittery Joe's Coffee.
Welcome back, DawgNation. This is DawgNation Game Day. I'm Kaylee Mansell with Mike Griffith here live from the field at, I think it's Caesars Superdome, but I think it's also changed like a bunch of times, so I want to make sure it's the Caesars Superdome.
It is Caesars Superdome, yes it is.
I know, but we're familiar with this territory.
I think we ought to call it Kirby Superdome.
If he wins tonight, it might have to be the Kirby Superdome.
Yeah.
One thing that we've been talking about this entire show is the confidence level that people have in this team to not just get past this game, but to also win a national championship. And as someone who has covered a lot of high-powered teams that have gone on to win national championships, when you look at this Georgia team, do you really believe that they are the favorite, that they can go all the way?
Yeah, I think it starts tonight. I think this is the biggest hump. We've seen what's happened with teams that have had a bye. Now, Indiana's changing that trend right now, and they look real good. That's the team to beat right now. But Georgia's got to get this momentum going. This is going to be a partisan Ole Miss crowd. I'm surprised how much more powder blue I've seen than red.
Well, they have the geographical advantage.
Well, they absolutely do, and they're not in the playoffs every year like Georgia is.
Yeah.
And Georgia fans are already like, well, we got to go to Arizona next week. And then you got look for Ole Miss. This is the best season in history. It doesn't get any better than this, and you wonder if the crowd can affect the game early. I did see Kewan Lacey come in, the running back. I talked with him the other day. He's a 1,000-yard rusher. He's going to be big. Georgia's ability to stop the run tonight. But dialing it back to what you said, Kaylee, Kirby Smart has approached this game differently than he did last year. Georgia's been a lot more aggressive in their practices. I think they're going to be looking for a fast start. If they can get up on the Rebels, get some momentum going, and then Carson Beck will be waiting for him in the desert.
Yeah, and as you can see right here, we've got a live shot of Gunnar Stockton, and this is really a full circle moment for him. Started his first game in here. Now he's been the starter all season long. I feel like we've had to see various versions of Gunnar Stockton this year. We saw the version of Gunnar Stockton against Ole Miss who could go shot for shot, and then we've seen a version of Gunnar who can slow down the game for the other team, can just get those yards on the ground. What version of Gunnar Stockton do you think we need to see in today's game? Does it have to be like last time, or the style that Gunnar is more comfortable playing?
Well, it depends on what Pete Golding does. Now, Pete Golding was the defensive coordinator for Ole Miss the last time these teams met. Now he's the head coach. He's got more say in the game plan. So here's the question. You got a high-powered offense. You know that Trinidad Chambliss is a very dangerous quarterback, dual-threat quarterback. If you're Pete Golding, do you defend Georgia differently? In other words, do you take more chances, get aggressive, and challenge Georgia to make the big play to force that tempo? Or do you play it like you typically did, where you try to maybe bend but don't break too much? I wonder how much different the Ole Miss game plan will be. Depending on what they do, Mike Bobo and Gunnar Stockton will dial it up. Now, if you ask Kirby Smart how he'd want to do it, he'd want to keep his offense on the field the whole time, keep the Ole Miss offense off the field, and play ball control. But if Ole Miss is going to load the box and challenge Georgia to make big plays, Gunnar's got to be able to pull the trigger, and you're going to need to see the Dogs do some big things.
I feel like at the beginning of the season, we were constantly looking around, like, where were the tight ends? Tight ends weren't getting the ball. It really didn't feel like until Ole Miss that we finally start to see the tight end production. Do you expect Bobo to have a similar layout tonight where they're getting it out to guys like Oscar Delp and Lawson Lucky?
Once again, depends on how Ole Miss defends. Now, that was what Ole Miss gave last time.
Right.
You got to think that Pete Golden was paying attention to the film. Right? Hey, that's Lawson Lucky over there. You might want to cover him, right?
Well, then, based on that, what can Georgia show that's different? Like, what's the recipe for giving something that maybe they haven't seen at this point from Georgia?
Well, and that's where the adjustments come in, and that's where the 3D chess comes in for these coaches. They come out, they get an idea how Ole Miss is defending them, what they're giving, and then based on the coverages, based on the fronts, they're going to call plays. Gunnar will have checks at the line of scrimmage. If they line up in this, you do that. If they line up in that, you do this. Down in distance. I mean, it's very fluid. And the thing that makes Georgia so dangerous is all the talent and all the personnel and the way Georgia, they can spread you out or they can pack it in. And that's where having these tight ends that are big, strong, and physical, they can either run out and catch passes and hurt you, or they can block your linebackers, depending on the personnel you have out there. I mean, if you're going to put an extra DB out there, Georgia's going to come at you. If you're going to load up the box, Georgia might spread you out. So that's the great thing, is the versatility of the offense. And then 2, Gunnar Stockton, his ability to extend plays. Even if you take away the primary, Gunnar can buy time with his legs, find another receiver, or pull it down, Kaylee, and give you another down. Maybe now it's 2nd and 5. It was going to be a pass. Everybody's covered. He runs for 5, 2nd and 5. Stay on schedule, stay on course with the chains, and then Georgia loads it up. So it's hard to say what the Georgia game plan is until we know how Ole Miss decides to try to defend them.
Okay, so I want you to think back to the very beginning of this season.
Yeah.
If I told you that Georgia would win the SEC championship against Alabama and get to here and play in the Sugar Bowl once again as the number 3 seed, would you believe me?
I would have believed you, but I wouldn't have believed Gunnar would have been in the top 10 in the Heisman Trophy.
Well, you also thought Austin Simmons was going to be the man, too.
Great point. You know, who would have thought that Trinidad Chambliss would be number 8?
Yeah.
I mean, these 2 quarterbacks have done an unbelievable job. And yeah, we saw Arch Manning emerge late, but not in the playoffs. We're watching Ty Simpson. He's taking a pretty good beating right now. You know, where's DJ Lagway? I don't even know where he's going to be playing next season. And wasn't the LSU quarterback supposed to be somebody?
It was a bad year for quarterback classes. Kate Klubnik, too.
Doug Nussmeier, he can't even get a free drink in the French Quarter right now. That's how bad a season he is. Now, Lane Kiffin's supposedly around here somewhere. You wonder if he's going to be standing outside the Ole Miss locker room going, hey, time to come to Baton Rouge. I do wonder how much of a distraction that is for Ole Miss.
Oh, for sure.
They dominated Tulane in the opening game, 41-10. How many of these Ole Miss players know that they're going to be playing for Lane Kiffin next year at LSU? Only 33% of this roster was recruited to Ole Miss. The rest are transfers. Conversely, Kaylee, 90% of the starters for Georgia were Kirby Smart signees out of high school. I think that Dogs continuity, I think that's going to make a difference tonight.
I think that you bring up a good point, and I don't think it's something that we've harped on enough at this point, and that's the distractions that are going on internally, especially for these guys that are coming out on the field right now as we speak. If you know that after this your teammate's up and leaving to go to LSU to play for your former coach, does that institute this mentality of, okay, it's not a we team, we're playing for the I, the individual?
Yeah, there's an old saying that the more you have invested, the more difficult it is to give up. And when I look at the Georgia Bulldogs and what they've invested into this season, going all the way back to the spring, and let's face it, a lot of people thought this was going to be a reloading year. And why wouldn't you think that? They lost 4 out of their 5 starting offensive linemen to the NFL, and they've got 5 guys out of last year's front 7 in the NFL, including 2 first-round draft picks. So if you would have said that Georgia was going to rank in the top 5 in the nation in run defense, and that they were going to run the ball this effectively, that would have been pretty hard to swallow.
Yeah.
But this has been an amazing rebuild. Kirby Smart had a vision in the spring. Fire, passion, and energy.
Run the ball, stop the run. That's what we've heard all season long.
And it has come to fruition. Now, they still got to execute tonight. You know, I don't think Gunnar Stockton is going to be overwhelmed by the moment. I thought it was interesting on Media Day, Kaylee. He admitted that he didn't have as much confidence as maybe we thought he did. And it was his first career start.
Yeah.
Different guy now.
Yeah, no, 100%. That's actually something that we can go ahead and do while you're here, if you don't mind.
Not at all.
I want to take a look back from Gunnar last year, going into that game. You know, there was a certain optimism that this Georgia team was going to play really hard for Gunnar because you could tell that they really, really liked him. That was very obvious in the SEC championship. And so in his first start last year here in the stadium, 234 passing yards, not bad. 1 touchdown, negative 23 rushing yards, and 1 fumble. But I don't put a Georgia loss on Gunnar Stockton. You know, they couldn't really do much from the very start, but now knowing what he is, he's such a better game manager. He's grown so much. He plays to his strengths, but also, too, I think Brandon Adams kind of said it best at the very beginning of the season. The version of Gunnar that we needed was a Will Howard type, where you just rely on the talent around you, minimize the mistakes. You don't have to be the star on the field. You just have to get the job done and play to the strengths of everyone around you and yours. So, I mean, just it is crazy to think about all he's accomplished and how much he's grown just in the course of 1 year. And I wonder if he could go back to that version of Gunnar today, I wonder what he would tell him.
Well, I mean, you tell him to put his nose in the playbook and have a good offseason,
Yes.
getting the timing down with receivers that actually catch the ball this season. You know, you had twice as many drop passes, but that 1 fumble, Kaylee, it was a big one.
Yeah.
It led to a touchdown. You know, you boil down, in a brief recap, Notre Dame scored 17 points in 54 seconds. They won the game 23-10, okay? Georgia fumbled going inside the 10. I believe Notre Dame's total yardage was about 244, 254. It was the fewest total yards by any college football playoff team winner. So the defense kind of did their job. Obviously, there was the special teams breakdown on the kick return for a touchdown. It wasn't that Gunner got Georgia beat. It's that Gunner was not yet good enough to lift Georgia to a win like he has this year. When you look at his fourth quarter numbers, Gunner's completing 87% of his passes in the fourth quarter. Gunner Stockton, when Georgia is trailing in games, has 8 touchdown passes, no interceptions. Gunner on scrambles of 3rd down and 4 or less, he's converted for a first down 13 out of 17 times, and on the 4 times that he's run the ball on 4th down, he's converted every time. So this is a player that has made the clutch plays time and time again. He's ready to seize the moment. He knows what happened here, just like everyone else. I think he's going to be solid as a rock. I think the key is going to be they have to prevent Ole Miss from making explosive plays, make Trinidad Chambliss navigate his way down the field, keep the ball in front of you, and put the leather on Kewan Lacey. You've got to stop the running game and deter that very talented running back.
All right, so with that, Mike, we're going to let you go. Thank you so much for coming down here and joining me, and hopefully we're going to be having another conversation next Thursday in Arizona.
Yeah, I'll see you next Thursday in Arizona, Kaylee. Appreciate
Sounds
it.
good. All right, there it is. We've got Chambliss. He's right here in front of us warming up. I bet you if I take this microphone, I could actually get it pretty close to him, but I thought he looked really good in the rematch against Tulane, and you can say whatever you want about that matchup, but he has really been the success story for Ole Miss this time around, and I had my good friend Jeff Sentell, who was scouting out what was going on the Georgia end. So as you can see, we've got Trinidad Chambliss here behind us, but I want to know, what did you see on the other side of the field when you were watching Georgia warm up?
Well, first of all, I got to be a recruiting guy here, Kaylee.
Talk to me.
Georgia's early enrollees were actually able to come with the field. They went through the dog walk. Nick Abrams was in the linebackers. I saw Ryan Mosley. I saw Craig Dandridge. I did not see Ty Green try to do everything possible, like go out with the DBs and then the running backs and then the kick returners. I will say this, Kaylee. I don't know if you've noticed this, but it seems like Ole Miss is trying really hard to bathe Pete Golding in love. Every time they see him, they cheer him wildly, like, we've got a football coach and he loves us and he wants to be here and he's breathing. They are very, very much appreciative of one Coach Golding.
Well, I mean, they kind of have to be for one instance, but, we talked about him a little bit earlier, but he's obviously vastly different from Lane Kiffin, just in the way that he addresses things. I don't know, his post-game interview after their win against Tulane, I was like, dang, I can't imagine the drastic difference between Kiffin and a guy like that, but also defensive-minded coach. But, yes, you can tell this fan base, you kind of have to be grateful for him the way things played out with Lane Kiffin. You got to put all your eggs in one basket there.
They're probably like, that anyone in a relationship that's already in the clinger stage.
It's love bombing. They're love bombing him.
Please don't go. Please don't go anywhere. Another thing, Kaylee, this might be too much good news too soon for Georgia fans, but I saw Zachariah Branch in his pregame tennis ball drill as locked in as I've ever seen him. He's doing new tricks. It's like he's waiting for the ball, like Matrix Neo style. And there's a new development. Somehow people have gotten wind of his Zachariah Branch pregame tennis ball drill.
Yeah.
His tennis balls now have G's on them. So I think they've gotten them from the tennis team and brought them into the football program.
It's interesting because Zachariah Branch has 73 catches on the year this season. He's 3 catches away from tying UGA's single-season record for receptions. It's not been since 1993 when Bryce Hunter had 76. So Branch just 3 catches away from tying that record. He's going to probably do that tonight.
He better do that in the first quarter, first half, Kaylee, if the Mike Bobo's call script and his call sheet goes according to plan.
All right, so anything on the guys that we talked about earlier this week with injuries? How did Ethan Barbour look? How did Colby Young look? Do you really expect to see those guys out there today?
Well, one name that nobody's talking about is Chauncey Bowens. Chauncey looks really fired up, really motivated. He's got that steely gaze in his eye. Kaylee, Ethan Barbour looks like he's ready to take on the world. I did see Colby Young come out very focused, very stern with his gaze. As soon as he hit the grass, he hit his knees, he said a prayer, and then he clapped his hands and he was ready to go to work. I think Colby Young might surprise some people.
Just because it's New Year's Day, I feel like I have to make the joke once. They told us that we weren't going to see Colby Young for the rest of the year. I didn't realize that meant just 2025 and not the entire season, you know?
Kaylee, that's very clever. That's a nice pregame show line right there. And really, Kaylee, what we said before is like, Colby Young's like 24 years old. He's been in college football for forever, and they've got like 19, 20-year-olds trying to guard him.
All right, so I do want to do some Sentell's intel, and since we've already talked about some of the recruiting numbers earlier this year, what I want to do instead is talk about the freshmen that have emerged in the back half of the season. I think with the Gabe Harris injury, there's a really big opportunity for a guy like Zayden Walker today, and also a guy like Rayshawn Dinkins to carry that same momentum that we saw in the back half. So just talk to me about those guys. Why do you think it took them a little bit longer? Was it really just a matter of you had to wait your time?
Well, Kaylee, I think it better be Rayshawn Dinkins tonight because Jonell Aguero's out on the injury report. With a guy like Zayden, I think he was always capable of doing what he's doing now and just turn him loose, go find the ball, go find the pass rusher. Kaylee, I don't know if the average Georgia fan watching is aware of this. They'll tell me in the comment section below. But that is a linebacker that caught like 45 passes for 8 touchdowns his senior year in high school. He was a slot receiver. He caught a lot of bubble screens and turned them into big plays. That's the guy chasing quarterbacks at 2:30 for the Georgia Bulldogs. And I love how people call him the Sly County Rabbit a little bit.
Sly County. I've had to repeat that 100 times to remember that's how you call it.
That's right. He's going to make folks remember Sly County by the time he's done with Georgia. I think Elijah Griffith's in for a big game.
Yeah.
Kaylee, I want to especially give shout out. I think Talon Taylor, Elias Williams, and Ethan Barbour will have an increased role a little bit tonight.
Yeah, I think Ethan Barbour is probably the one that I'm the most curious about because I remember watching the injury happen. I thought there's no way that he comes back from that. When we saw him at the Sugar Bowl Media Day, I was like, he looks like he never even left the field. So Mike and I were talking about earlier, I mean, obviously they've gone back and they've watched the tape from the first game, and yes, Kirby Smart's 4-0 rematches, but you have to throw something at them that maybe they haven't seen on the tape. I think Ethan Barbour could maybe be that guy.
Kaylee, it had dialed up for Georgia to be physical, short yardage. That's what Ethan Barbour did. Again, mind you, folks, it's been a long time, but Ethan Barbour started his first game as a true freshman at the University of Georgia. That is very rarefied air, but he got in there, and I think that's the way they're going to come at Ole Miss and try to set the tone tonight. Much like Indiana has looked better than Alabama from the start, I think Georgia's going to try to look like a very complete football team right now.
All right, so we're going to do some satisfying stats. Then we're going to talk to our friend Connor Riley, who's going to give us more updates on the injury report. So when we're looking at the offensive stats, I think based on the way that things played out the first time between Georgia and Ole Miss, it was not hard to put these together at all. In fact, we got them done quite quickly. So we're going to go ahead and show you the offensive side of the ball for me. I know no turnovers feels like a lot to ask for. I'm going to aim for perfect. If it's one, that's fine. But for me, no turnovers. Also, a halftime lead. I feel like when Georgia's gotten the halftime lead, they can make people play to their style of offense. If it comes down to a shootout, again, Georgia really hasn't had to do that in a while. But when you have that semi-comfortable halftime lead, then Kirby Smart, being the incredible coach that he is, he can make you play his style of football, and that's okay with me. Talk to me about yours.
So, Kaylee, I got two. Number one, if you look back to the last game, Georgia had running back by committee. They had about 80 yards from Nate Frazier, about 70 yards from Chauncey Bowens, and then about 59 from Gunnar Stockton, throwing a little bit more here and there. And they had 230 on the ground, 224, 7 yards per carry. I don't think they have to dial up quite that much, although Kirby would try to hit 250 tonight if he could. I think over 200 rushing yards, that's where you get in control. And like one of those things we got to think about as well, Kaylee, because everybody says if something has happened 6 times in a row, that it is a certainty today in the college football landscape. Well, Ole Miss has not stopped Georgia yet on a college football drive in the year in this 2025-2026 football season. So that's one thing they've not done yet as well.
And then at the bottom, you've got 8 touches for Zachariah Branch, which would absolutely crush the single season reception record if he gets 8 touches tonight. I think that's the one player that most people are really excited to see what he does out here against this Ole Miss team today. Now let's go to the defense, because that's clearly the biggest difference this time around. Georgia facing Ole Miss is the defense. I feel like I'm really going back to last year where I just don't want Ole Miss to score on the first possession.
Seems like a long
Get
time
them
ago.
a stop on the first drive, right? I mean, that was really the story for Georgia last season was always team comes out, they score right away. Okay, that's how it's gonna be. But I would like to see Georgia get a stop on that first drive that Ole Miss has. And Georgia didn't sack Trinidad Chambliss at all. That cannot be the case in today's game. So give me 2+ sacks from this really improved Georgia defensive line, even with Gabe Harris out.
How about one with Chris Cole, one with Zayden Walker, maybe throw in one Raylan Wilson or C.J. Allen? You're
I can
good
take
with that? You know, the two I identified, Kaylee, is in that first game, Ole Miss only had like 78 yards rushing, but 49 of them, I believe, came from Trinidad Chambliss on kind of quarterback escape plays and stuff like that. I think if you keep Trinidad under 50 yards, and that sets up well for holding Ole Miss under 100 rushing yards. My second one, people are going to go, who in the world is Oscar Bird? Oscar Bird is the Ole Miss punter. He only punted twice in that game earlier this year in Sanford Stadium. So if you get 3 punts out of Oscar Bird today, then the defense is doing its job.
Do we think that on the Georgia end that Brett Thorson is going to be excited if he doesn't have to get out there today, or do you think he's going to be upset if he can't get out there today?
I would love to see a cheeky, sarcastic Brett Thorson tweet after tonight about how he hates Gunnar Stockton because he never lets him do his job. Mind you, that's the Ray Guy Award winner as the best player in college football.
All right, so before we get to Connor Riley, going to give a shout out to our friends at Kroger. I know it's going to start to warm up here in just a little bit, but in this new year, give more time back to yourself, especially if you have to go back to work in just a few days because it's off holiday now. You can do that by signing up for Kroger Boost, where they'll have those groceries delivered straight to your home. Also get 2 times the fuel points, which will really add up over the course of the year. So now we're getting into those early holidays. You got Valentine's coming up and more things after that. So give time back to yourself. Visit your local Kroger in-store or go online to Kroger.com/boost. All right. So we're going to go ahead and bring on Connor Riley, and we talked about some of the injury-related stuff just based on what we've seen, but with the final injury report, I'm assuming that it's probably safe to say Gabe Harris not playing.
This week for Georgia, no Gabe Harris, no Janelle Aguero, no Drew Bobo. Colby Young, wide receiver, not listed. That means he's going to be able to play. Tight end, Ethan Barbour, not listed. He's going to be able to play. On the Ole Miss side, Keewan Lacey not listed, Caleb Odom not listed. That means those guys are going to be able to play. So as healthy as these teams are, no real uncertainty with what this team is ultimately going to look like from a health standpoint when they step on the field here in the Sugar Dome in a little bit over an hour.
So who steps up in Gabe Harris's place? Is it easy to say it's just going to be a guy like Zayden Walker, or is there maybe somebody that we haven't talked enough about in this conversation?
No, I think this is a big game for Joseph Jonah-Ajayi. He's a guy who's played a lot of snaps for Georgia over the course of the season, but has not emerged as the impactful defender that Gabe Harris was. I think they can rotate and move guys around. Maybe you play more Quintavious Johnson at defensive end spot, which opens the door for an Elo Madozi, a Chris Jones there at the outside linebacker position, maybe even an Isaiah Gibson, though I'm skeptical of that there. But I think it's a big night for Joseph Jonah-Ajayi, former 5-star prospect who's been a contributing member on this Georgia defense this year. But this is going to be the most important game of his life, and they're really counting on him. I spoke with Trey Scott earlier this week. He talked about Jonah-Ajayi doing the simple things, making the layups, and doing the things that he needs to, not feeling like he needs to go out there and do what Gabe Harris has done in recent weeks.
So kind of transitioning to the offensive side of the ball, and Jeff and I kind of talked about this a little bit earlier, and I want to get your take on it. Could this finally be one of those nights where we see Chauncey Bowens have another big game? Really, the status of him has kind of been unclear up until this point. Was injured for a little bit, then taken off. We really haven't seen that much of him, despite having an incredible middle of the year part of this season. I mean, is this the day that we finally get Chauncey Bowens back, or is it still going to be Nate Frazier time?
I think this is Nate Frazier time. Now, I think the time off did Chauncey Bowens a lot of good. But while Chauncey has sort of been dealing with his various injuries, a leg injury at the end of the season there, and then a back injury he suffered at the end of the SEC championship game, I think that Nate Frazier has really emerged. He's a more all-around, a more complete running back at this point in time than I think Chauncey Bowens is. He had a receiving touchdown in this first game against Ole Miss. And so I think that Nate Frazier is a guy who's going to be Georgia's leading rusher in this game. And they're going to need to rely on that running game, especially because I think it's important to help keep Ole Miss offense off the field by controlling the game and running time of possession.
Yeah, that's something I'm curious to see too, because one thing that I don't think is going to change under Pete Golding is the pacing that we saw Ole Miss have. 11th in the country, just 24 seconds between plays. Georgia is 100th in the country, right around 28.5 seconds. And I feel like the reason that Georgia has been so successful in the back half of the season is because they stopped going shootout for shootout with all the teams that could do that. It started making everyone else play that style of ball. So I don't think the pace will change under Golding, but I would like to see Ole Miss have to go toe-to-toe with what Georgia's strength is tonight.
Right, I think the big thing for Georgia, and you didn't always see this in that first game against Ole Miss, make the Rebels drive the length of the field. They had a 75-yard touchdown to start the second half in that game in Athens. Try and limit the explosive plays, and if you're able to make Ole Miss play a four-quarter football game, I think that's where Georgia's advantages start to show up. They are a deeper team. They are a more talented team. They are also a better coach team, having Kirby Smart over Pete Golding. If they're able to extend this game out and pull Ole Miss into the proverbial deep waters, I think that's where Georgia really takes control of this football game.
Connor, I know everybody's been watching the injuries. Do you really think it's a rejuvenated player that comes back and sparks Georgia, or is it just more of the same of the script of a lot of these victories so far?
I think it's more of the same, specifically with Colby Young. Can you get him to 8 or 9 snaps and sort of see what he can do for you out there? I don't expect him to be the player he was before the injury, but I think they're going to lean on their guys. Zachariah Branch only needs 4 receptions in this game to set the single season record for Georgia, passing Bryce Hunter and the mark he set back in 1993. So I think this is a game, it's a Zachariah Branch game, it is a Nate Frazier game. And in the red zone, you look for a guy like a Dylan Bell, like an Oscar Delp, as a mismatch there in the short area of the field.
All right, so I would say that you could use that as your stat of the day about Zachariah Branch, but you can't because we've already used it. So do you have a stat of the day for a Sugar Bowl matchup?
I do. The number is 0. That is the number of sacks and tackles for loss that Georgia's defense had in the first game against Ole Miss. That is the only time in Kirby Smart's 137 games as Georgia's head coach that has ever happened. I think that you're going to see a more disruptive Georgia defense in this game. They're going to need to force a little bit more pressure and make Trinidad Chambliss a little bit more uncomfortable if that is to be the case and if they are to get another win against the Rebels.
Connor just went to the top of Stat Mountain there, sir. We salute you for your proficiency there and combing the record books for that one, man.
Yeah, thanks for that one, Connor. He really said that one with authority, and it was funny because I was like, yeah, he's right. No sacks, no tackles for loss, but then he hits you with the 137 number, and I was like, oh, man. I didn't realize it was that bad. But, I mean, that's who that defense was then. That's not who this defense is now.
I mean, really, that's one of the things I don't think gets talked about enough is just Georgia's players are kind of coming into their own right now. But at the same time, I don't know if this gets mentioned a lot because everybody brings up the young guys and how they're fitting in and they're figuring it out. You've got C.J. Allen playing the best football, I think, of his Georgia career, especially coming off the injury where he missed some practice time. He had some recovery time, but only missed 1 week and came back against Georgia Tech and Alabama. I think the rest in recovery is going to help him a lot too. Just bouncing back from that injury, he had to clean up on his knee. I think you're going to see C.J. Allen really wanting to put some NFL first-round tape out there as well.
So I want to circle back to something that we've been talking about all season long. Maybe that missing thing that wasn't on tape for Ole Miss the first time is Noah Thomas. We really started to see him emerge kind of after that, but it's been a little bit quiet for Noah Thomas in the last few weeks. Now, Zachariah Branch is the guy in this wide receiver room, but this may be a day where we're going to see more of Noah Thomas, perhaps one time in the end zone.
Here's what I think, Kaylee. Pete Golding, defensive coordinator, they're not going to let Lawson Lucky catch 3 touchdowns this time. That's one of the things they're going to like. Georgia beat us some other way. I think Georgia will try to get interesting out of the backfield, perhaps, maybe sneak a running back, but also they're going to try to go to their ex-receivers. They're going to try to go to a Noah Thomas, perhaps, as a guy when they overcompensate for the middle of the field. They're going to get a one-on-one against Noah they really like.
Yeah, and I want to continue on with wide receivers. We talked about Talon Taylor a little bit, another guy who really looks healthy. You were high on him at the beginning of the season. It's not like I expect Talon Taylor to start, but that could also be one of those things that you flash today, and that's going to be different because a lot of people, the last memory that they have of Talon is the Alabama drop. So maybe you're not looking in that direction, but we know how talented he is naturally and how hard he works.
I think you're going to get new memories about Talon Taylor pretty quick. Kaylee, it's one of those things now in college football when a guy's going to be a dude for you. He starts showing it late in his freshman year to kind of springboard to a great sophomore year. I think Talon has that ability. Remember, he got behind the Alabama defense and he got open and he made it look pretty easy. He catches those balls. I've covered his career more than anybody on the Georgia beat. He does not drop balls. So what I think you see there is kind of like that Kirby Smart stat that Connor brought down from Mount Bulldog or Mount DawgNation.
He brought it all the way up from the press box over there in Antarctica.
He had 2 stone tablets with that from Sinai coming down to that thing with that stat right there. But, you know, one of the things there is Talon Taylor doesn't drop the football, and you're going to see him catch a lot of big balls for Georgia.
All right, so we kind of hit on the defense. We've hit on the offense, but I feel like it's important to hit on the special teams today, too, because even though Peyton Woodring didn't really have to kick a lot of field goals, the first time that these teams played, we've seen a lot of missed field goals in the playoffs, especially from distances where it feels like you got to make those. And so with Peyton Woodring being one of the most consistent field goal kickers in the entire country, Georgia fans have to take a deep breath, because we've seen a lot of guys who feel like they should make them, don't, but you've got a consistent guy in Peyton Woodring.
I mean, what Ole Miss wants to do is they want to turn all those Georgia touchdowns into threes. And Kaylee, it's funny, we try to find a moment to get you to cackle during our broadcasts. And it's funny watching all these playoff football games, and Kaylee sees Ohio State, Kaylee sees Oklahoma. They're like, oh my gosh, the hardest thing in the world to do right now is to kick a field goal for some of these teams. And that's why Peyton Woodring time is so important, as reliable and as clutch. Kaylee, people don't know this, but he's the most accurate kicker from the field goal percentages in SEC history over the last 30 years.
Yeah.
I think people take that a little bit for granted, but if this gets close and the offense kind of stumbles a bit in the red zone, they've got pretty much a sure thing in Peyton Woodring.
Well, it's just beyond me, and we won't spend too much time on it, that you've got these programs that are paying millions and millions and millions of dollars for their roster, but you don't have a kicker that can kick it from 26 yards out. So you got to start getting your priorities in line, because we know that Georgia signed the #1 kicker and #1 punter in their 2026 class. That's something that they do not miss out on, and that's what really separates them from the really good teams to the great elite teams.
I think it's the hardest part for people to fathom, because they see on Sundays and these guys are kicking 60-yarders and they never miss. They're all like dead-eye Hawkeye right there. And then you see college football and these guys struggle, especially in the big moments. And I think one of the things Georgia has had all year, and it's been a constant through Kirby Smart's time, is they have really strong kicking game and special teams.
You said something there that made me kind of reflect just on the team behind us in Georgia, talking about struggling through the big moments. That is not something that this Georgia team does, especially on this stage right now. Sugar Bowl, Ole Miss. I feel like out of every team that we've seen in the college football playoff, that Georgia has faced the most adversity, and in the big moments, besides one earlier this year that we don't have to talk about too much, they've shown up in those moments.
You know, one of the things, you sit there and you look around in our shot, most of our astute DawgNation folks will realize right over our shoulder, that's T-Rob, but of course that's Matt Stinchcomb, longtime Georgia Bulldog, SEC Network personality, talking to the Georgia safeties coach right now prior to the game right there. And you know, Matt does a great job as a broadcaster, but he was a heck of a football player for the Dogs as well.
I don't want to do it, but I feel like I have to do it, because we just need to go ahead and get it out of the way. I know a lot of Georgia fans were really shocked to see Miami take down Ohio State last night, and obviously there's a lot of history. If Georgia does win this game, they're going to go on to face Miami, but I feel like it was something that when we were in the hotel, everybody's talking about, oh, well, Carson Beck versus Georgia, and you really have to go one game at a time. So how do you kind of keep that balance of making sure that you're not looking ahead to the next theme, because that's what everybody else is talking about?
You know, here's the one thing I don't think anybody will talk about with the Carson Beck story this week. Applaud the media members that you follow if they do. But one of the things I would imagine, if it is Georgia versus Miami, I bet the Miami defensive coordinator will spend 5 hours with Carson this week going over everything he knows about Georgia. What are their checks? What do they do pre-snap? What do they do post-snap? How do they like to disguise things? What are they good at? What gives them trouble? I think that's the way Carson's insight into the Georgia defense, I think that's an asset Miami will have there.
Yeah, but at the same time, it's just like I don't know how much these players, like, is there going to be more motivation if they make it, or is it one of those things like that, the Mad Men meme, where it's like, I don't think about you at all?
I think it's one of those things where if you really got to the bottom of it, there's no ambivalence, there's no animosity. there's really no brokenheartedness either, Kaylee. I think it's just disconnection, which is why they rallied around Gunner so well.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like, night and day between the two. And I think, Carson, one of the things Mike Bobo said this week is he was very proud of what Georgia did with Mike Bobo and Carson Beck, because everybody thinks they turn the ball over a lot. But Carson did lead Georgia to 2 SEC title games in his 2 years at Georgia. They lost one. He started in a game that they ended up winning. So he was a pocket passer. He wasn't like Gunner in a lot of ways, but he brought Georgia back in a lot of ball games to get him some big wins.
All right, so what we're going to do now is move on from that. Let's go ahead and get it out of the way because we got to focus on the game that's going on behind us right now. So as we begin to wrap up, it's time for our keys to the game. So you and I really had 2 different approaches on our keys this week. We will go ahead and kick it off with my key, then we'll get to Jeff's key. I feel like a lot of it's just based on what you saw. I'm a run the dang ball girl. This is not the first time I've thrown it up, but Ole Miss, definitely their rushing defense is the weaker part of their defense. They've got a really good secondary and passing defense, so I really think for Georgia, got to run the ball. Also, they just rushed for 221 yards versus Ole Miss, and I really think that the one advantage that Georgia does have from the bye week is that rest advantage. This is a really loaded running back room who's got a fresh set of legs, maybe something that they've got. I mean, obviously, they definitely got that over Keywan Lacey, who came out of that game injured last week but is going to play today. So if there was ever a time to run the dang ball, it's now.
I think it's always the time to run the dang ball, especially in playoff games, Kaylee, because we know what travels no matter what. It's a stout defense and a stout run game. And I think Georgia is just wanting to play physical. I would look for Georgia to get in a lot of that maybe heavy personnel packages, the 12 personnel, the 13 personnel, and just say, hey, try and stop us, especially with Gunner in the run game. When you add an Ethan Barbour there as a type of H-back right there, I think it opens up a lot. I think Georgia will try to stem and do some really nice wrinkles off that because, Kaylee, you and I both know Ethan Barbour can go catch a football as well.
I mean, everybody talks about Ethan Barbour as the H-back. Like, that's like the one thing that always comes up, and I feel like that's like a very...
You're like, hold on.
Like a generational thing, you know?
That's like having a Porsche and says, yeah, I can put it in park and put it in reverse. That's really not what you're here for, but there's a lot more under the hood than that. And I mean, again, I think Ethan has as bright a future as anybody on the Georgia team. You know, people were talking about his red shirt, whatever with the loss. I think Ethan Barbour is the type of player that will only spend 3 seasons in Athens regardless, especially with the work ethic and everything he brings to the table.
All right, Jeff, it's time. Walk me through your key. What you got?
So my key to the game, Kaylee, is I think you need to find a way where Gunner can just operate the jet. Gunner's got to find a way to really stop them down. You've got to prevent Ole Miss a lot of times from giving them extra opportunities. I think that the most important thing for Ole Miss is to get some early scores against Georgia and to try to feel like they're in this football game and they're comfortable. Another thing Georgia wants to do is they need to stay fresh. They need to get stops, and that will give them the ability to attack. I think Georgia's going to attack a lot against Chambliss early and try to get him off his launch point a lot. We saw at the end of that game, it was almost like Georgia decided, all right, you know that thing when my son obviously plays the video games a lot. We've seen that meme where the young man picks up the sticks and he leans forward towards the screen. I think that's what Georgia did in the last 2 or 3 drives of that fourth quarter against Ole Miss in Sanford when they really shut them out.
Yeah, I think back to that Alabama game where you could just tell the Georgia defense was tired. They were constantly on the field. Georgia offense could score. You don't want to see that today. And that kind of brings me to, we got to talk about Alabama, because obviously we're doing this right now. We can't see what's going on. Indiana up on Alabama 38-3 with 2 minutes to go. Do you think that people will look at that and try to diminish Georgia's SEC championship, whatever, Alabama, because of what Indiana's doing?
I don't think they will. I think Georgia was probably a team that kind of broke them a little bit, exposed them a little bit. And you got to remember, Alabama right now, they're playing in what was at least affected by weather a little bit, that game right there. I think the main thing most people are doing is they're trying to think back, Kaylee, when was the last time Alabama lost this many football games in a season? You've got to go back to Nick Saban's first year, way back in, I believe it's 2006, 2007, and when Alabama lost this many football games.
Do you think that Alabama fans will start again with the fire DeBoer stuff, or can you take that loss because it's the #1 team in the country?
I don't know if it's that. They're never going to be happy with that, especially how they didn't look good in doing so. I think they feel happy that the Michigan job has been claimed and everything else. But, it's one of those things I think Alabama's really going to struggle. Kaylee, you're going to hear Kalen DeBoer start echoing some of those things Kirby Smart said about we've got to find a way to run the ball and stop the run because that makes everything easier, especially next year for Ty Simpson returning at Alabama.
All right, so also we're talking about first of the year. Let's talk about a Cody Chafin's masterpiece. First part of the year, Georgia's been here before. They've done it before. We're going to show it to you while the Ole Miss band is so loud you can't even hear us. How about that?
Sounds good.
Big dog. Big dog, show my teeth 'cause I can't stop winning. Trophies all in my case 'cause I can't stop winning. Bright lights beam for the soul, ain't nobody did it. Yeah, I'm with it. Yeah, I'm with it, hey, big dog. Big dog putting in pain while the world keeps spinning. First and last, wanna lead every day, I've been it. Bright lights beam for the soul, ain't nobody did it. Yeah, I'm with it. Yeah, I'm with it, hey, big dog. I love the pressure. Way diamonds made, I can't settle for lesser. I know they love it, there's no need to fess up. I teach the game like I was a professor. I'm chasing my dreams, there's no over-aggressive. Chill in my veins, I'm so cold when I dress up.
All right, and also shout out to Christian Miller who helped us pick out the hype song earlier this week. So if you haven't seen it yet, he was a really big part in that. We really appreciate him doing that for us. So we've got a few more minutes left. I really think that my final thought on all of this is Georgia is a team that has been here before. They have gone through so many trials and tribulations this season. We've watched them get better in real time with our eyes, and I do feel like they are the team in the playoff that has the most momentum. We can go ahead and shut down all these bye week rumors after seeing what Indiana did to Alabama. This team, they needed the rest. Not concerned about that. Nobody's been through more adversity than them, and I think with Kirby Smart at the head, those two things combined, that's a national championship team right there.
It's definitely national championship caliber the way they've been playing lately. They got complimentary football, everything happening on both sides of the ball. I just can't wait to see how Georgia finds a different way tonight. I think Ole Miss will put up a great effort. I just think personnel-wise, they're only going to be able to hold it together against Georgia for about 2.5 quarters. The other thing I think Gunnar Stockton has a game in his bag tonight where you see Gunnar Stockton look like the poised competitor he is. From all accounts that I picked up this week, he looked very relaxed, very composed, very chill, very prepared. He's just kind of going to trust the work that he's put in right now, and I think this is a way where Georgia, now everybody's going to be talking about Miami next week, potentially if Georgia's season continues. They're going to be talking about Indiana as the rightful #1 team. I think Georgia's going to have something to say about that tonight.
And I'm really excited that Georgia gets the chance to be here tonight. I honestly didn't want Georgia to play in the Sugar Bowl, but now that they're here and they have a chance to redeem themselves in the same place that their season ended last year, what an opportunity for the Dogs. What an opportunity for DawgNation, and we're so grateful to be here experiencing it, and we're grateful for all of you for joining us each week. Hopefully, it'll be me and Jeff again on the field next Thursday, but with that, this is going to be DawgNation Game Day. We got kickoff coming up soon, and we'll see you for the post-game show with Brandon Adams.